Today, I want to talk to everybody who is trying to start a business, build a personal brand, work on their side hustle, or what have you, and how long it actually takes to become successful in that thing. So, I think we've all heard about the 10,000 hour rule. It takes 10,000 hours to become a master at something. And it's a very daunting thing to hear because you hear 10,000 hours and you think, I don't even have 10,000 hours to give. And how many days, how many weeks, how many months, how many years is it going to take me to reach that 10,000 hour level? And I think that actually kind of persuades people away from starting. They think that if they can't give that 10,000 hours, then they're never going to reach the level they want to reach. And there's actually a lot of studies out there that do say, okay, 10,000 hours is what it takes to become a master. But in a lot of cases, we don't need to become the master of something. We can actually become proficient at something with as little as 20 hours of work. So if you put 20 hours of focused effort into something, you can become proficient at that thing. And that I think is a lot more attainable, a lot more realistic, and a lot more encouraging. So instead of thinking about putting 10,000 hours into something, think about putting 20 hours into something. And that's phone away. That is not scrolling on Instagram or TikTok. That's not answering phone calls or text messages, getting distracted with YouTube videos. 20 hours of undivided attention, and you can become proficient in most things. And I think that is a lot more encouraging. That gives people hope to say, okay, 20 hours, I can find 20 hours. Maybe I can't do that over the course of a couple days or a long weekend, but 20 hours is something I can actually realistically accomplish and actually put forth. So think about that. So 20 hours. I think a lot of people, though, underestimate how long it takes to actually become successful in something. So when you're learning a skill, it might take 20 hours. But when you're trying to build a business or build a personal brand, whatever it is that you're trying to do, of course, it's going to take longer than 20 hours. It's going to take a lot longer than you actually think. I see a lot of people starting out think that in the first month, 2 months, 6 months, a year, that they're going to become wildly successful. And unfortunately, that just isn't the reality. There's a lot of people online um, that try to kind of paint this picture of entrepreneurship, of business, of building a personal brand that makes it seem like it happens overnight. And that just isn't the case. When you think of people that have really strong personal brands, you think of like the Gary Vaynerchuks of the world. You think of Joe Rogan. Right now, Alex Hormozy is becoming wildly popular. If you look at how long they've been at their craft for, it will blow your mind. I mean, Joe Rogan's been at it for over 2 decades. Gary Vaynerchuk's been at it for probably close to 2 decades, at least over a decade. And when they first start out, they don't have that initial following. Everybody sees what they are now, but people don't realize when they were first starting out, nobody was watching them. Nobody knew who they were. And the difference with those individuals is that they were thinking longer term. They weren't thinking, I need to get famous in the next month, 6 months, a year. They were saying, if I'm consistent and I work every day towards something, in the next decade, 2 decades, I can be fairly big. I can build a name for myself. I can build a reputation. I can build a following. And that's the mindset that you need to have with anything, personal brand, business, becoming an expert at something. It takes a lot longer than you realize. And I think it's important to have that level of expectation because when you first start out, if you have this idea that you're going to start a business and you're going to become a millionaire in 6 weeks or 6 months, you're going to get very discouraged very quickly because I can tell you right now, I've started two businesses. And the first business I started back in, technically, we launched in the end of 2019. So, it's been, almost 4 years now, a little more than 4 years of working every day towards something. And I just started paying myself a few months ago. So, I went years without taking a salary out of the business. And that's the reality. And that's not like a poor me, looking for some sort of sympathy or, brownie points or cookies from anybody. That's literally telling people the reality of it. And that's the case for most people. Every once in a while, you come across somebody who puts out a product, puts out a service, has a product or, a video go viral, and sure, they make it overnight. But I can tell you that is not the norm. I know dozens and dozens and dozens of people who have started businesses, and some are very successful, some are still a little early on, but there's one consistent thing across the board, and it's the time it takes to build something. So when you're looking to get started into something, have that longer term thinking. Because right now there's a lot of impatient people out there. They want the instant gratification, the overnight success, and that is the quickest way to failure. That's the quickest way to anxiety and stress. That's the quickest way to force yourself to give up. Because when it does not happen, you get very anxious. You're saying to yourself, is it me? Am I not capable? What's going on? And you give up and you want to start something else or you want to move on. But if you stay at something for long enough, it's going to be unreasonable to think that you won't become successful. Whatever it is, think about something that you want to do. If I gave you 5 years, 10 years, 20 years to think about nothing other than one thing, think about how good you become at that one thing. If you woke up every single day for a decade, that's all you thought about. That's all you were working on. It would be unreasonable to think that you wouldn't be successful. I mean, all of these people that have done it and have had success, that's what they've done. They've kind of silenced the outside world. They've got really focused and had tunnel vision, essentially, to going after one particular thing. And after 5 years, 10 years, they've started to have success. Because what people don't realize is the power of compounding and the power of momentum. We think of compounding a lot in the stock market. We say, okay, well, will you invest X amount of dollars? In 7 years, that money will double. And then again, in 7 years, that money will double. And you look at some of these numbers and you say, wow, if I started off with $10,000 in 60 years, this money might become significant because of that compounding nature. What we don't realize is the same is true when you're trying to build a business or a personal brand. Momentum is real. It's a very real thing. And the problem is, oftentimes in the early days, we don't see the momentum because it's such a small change. If you think about it, say you start with one becomes two. It's still a very small number. You probably aren't recognizing much change. Two becomes four. Still probably don't recognize enough change. But as you go and it's 1,000, 10,000, 20,000, and those numbers start doubling, that becomes real. And those are the changes that people realize. But in order to get to those higher amounts, you need to give it enough time. You have to give your thing enough time to grow, to develop, and to mature. So start thinking in longer terms, because that momentum will take place. You just have to be at it for a long enough period of time. And that's kind of the one thing that I'll say that most people fail to see in the early days. They get very discouraged because they're so close to the subject matter. They're so close to their business, their brand, that 6 months go by and they've really seen marginal change. But what they're doing is underestimating the amount of volume it's going to require to actually become successful. So the biggest piece of advice I can give to you is attack every day with energy, attack every day with the desire to become successful, but have a longer term vision as well that you can fall back on so that you're not getting discouraged or overwhelmed or anxious. You can say to yourself, okay, here are the changes that I'm making this week. Here's the progress I'm making this month. But no, it's not going to happen overnight. If you say to yourself, I'm going to do X, Y, and Z thing today. But if every day you're taking one step forward, you're making one change, one iteration, one improvement, after a long enough period of time, those will add up, and that will become a very, very real thing. So when you have that longer term thinking, that's when I think people become successful. And I think that's what people need to start doing, because if you give yourself a long enough period of time, there's no reason why you can't become successful. But give yourself that time.